Morning light was wrong. That's the only way I can describe it. I've walked into my bakery every morning for 31 years, and I know exactly how the sun comes through the east-facing windows around 6:15. It catches the flour dust in the air and turns everything gold. That morning, 3 days before our anniversary celebration, the light upstairs was already on when I pulled into the laneway. Interior light, fluorescent, the kind that doesn't belong at 5:45 in the morning. I almost didn't notice. I was thinking about the cake order for Saturday, running the numbers in my head. 200 guests, 3 tiers, the fondant roses my daughter-in-law had requested in pale yellow because she said they'd photograph better than white. I had a travel mug of coffee in one hand and my keys in the other, and I was halfway to the front door when the delivery driver from the bread supplier stepped out of his truck and held up his hand. His name is Walt. He's been delivering to me since 2007. Quiet man, mid-50s, never says much beyond what the weather's doing and whether the Trans-Canada has construction. So when he stepped in front of me and lowered his voice, I stopped. "Don't use the front," he said. "I saw someone go in through the side entrance about 20 minutes ago. Didn't look like your staff." I remember standing very still. The coffee mug was warm against my palm. "Are you sure?" He nodded once, tall, dark coat, had a key. Only 4 people have a key to this building. Me, my son, my bakery manager, who I'll call by his title alone, and my accountant. I thanked Walt quietly and told him to leave the delivery at the loading dock. I went around to the back. I want to tell you about this bakery before I tell you what I found inside, because the place matters. My late husband and I opened Hartwell's in 1993 in a converted Victorian on Dunlop Street in Barrie, Ontario. We had $1,600 saved, a second-hand Hobart mixer, and a sourdough starter he'd been feeding since university. We named it after his mother. We almost lost it twice in the early years, once to a burst pipe in January that flooded the whole ground floor, and once in 2009 when the recession hit and people stopped buying celebration cakes. Both times we held on. My husband passed in 2018, and I've run it alone since then, with my son by my side and a small staff I trust like family. The 31st anniversary party was my son's idea. He'd rented the community hall 2 blocks away, invited our suppliers, loyal customers going back decades, even reached out to a food journalist from the Toronto Star who'd written about us years ago. He'd been planning it for months. Honestly, it was the most involved I'd seen him in the business in a long time, and I had been grateful for it. I came in through the kitchen. The back door opened quietly. I've always kept that hinge oiled. The kitchen was dark, exactly as it should be. I could smell yesterday's close, the faint sweetness of burnt sugar and yeast that never fully leaves a bakery, the kind of smell that lives in the walls. I stood at the bottom of the stairs that lead up to the office, and I listened. Voices, 2 of them, one I recognized immediately. My accountant had been with me for 11 years. He came recommended by my brother-in-law, started handling my books part-time, and gradually became the person who managed everything financial, payroll, HST remittances, the equipment loan we'd taken in 2017 for the new deck ovens. I had trusted him completely, more than completely. After my husband died, he was the one who sat across from me at that desk and helped me understand what the business looked like going forward. He had been patient and kind, and I had been grateful. The second voice I didn't recognize at first, lower, clipped, businesslike. I pressed myself against the wall at the bottom of the stairs, and I listened. What I heard took me several minutes to fully understand, because my mind kept trying to reject it. Not the words themselves, those were clear enough, but the meaning behind them, the shape of what had been happening, apparently, for the better part of 2 years. My accountant was selling someone access to my supplier contracts. That's the simple version. The longer version is this: Hartwell's has relationships with small, local suppliers that took me decades to build. A heritage grain farmer outside Collingwood, a dairy near Elmvale that still does glass bottle deliveries, a maple producer in Halliburton whose syrup we use in our signature loaf. These relationships aren't just personal. They represent cost structures and quality standards that larger bakeries can't easily replicate. We'd been approached before by a regional chain that wanted to buy us out, and I'd refused. Twice. What I was hearing, standing at the bottom of my own stairs in the dark, was my accountant providing detailed financial breakdowns. Our margins, our seasonal revenue patterns, our supplier pricing. To someone who worked, it became clear for that same regional chain. He was being paid for it. He had apparently been paid for it since roughly the fall of 2023. And the anniversary celebration, the event my son had been planning so lovingly, the party meant to honor 31 years, was apparently the planned endpoint. The accountant had told them we'd be distracted and understaffed that weekend. It was meant to be when they moved on the supplier relationships directly, cutting us out. I didn't move for a long time. I want to be honest about what that stillness felt like, because I think people imagine betrayal as something loud, something that hits you like a physical force and sends you backward. It wasn't like that. It was more like the floor, becoming very slightly uncertain beneath my feet, a vertigo that had nothing to do with my balance. 11 years. He had been in my home for Christmas dinner. He had known my husband. He had held my hand at my husband's funeral. Eventually, I heard them finishing up. I stepped back into the kitchen, and I went out the way I came in. I sat in my car in the laneway for 22 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. Then I called my daughter-in-law. This is where I have to tell you something about her, because I am aware that the relationship between a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law is a complicated one, and I will not pretend mine was simple. She and my son had been together for 6 years, married for 3. She is a careful, precise woman. She works in supply chain logistics, which, as it turned out, was exactly the kind of mind I needed that morning. There had been times in those 6 years when I'd wished she were warmer, more expressive, more willing to simply trust my way of doing things. I had probably been, on occasion, difficult. She answered on the second ring. It was not yet 6 in the morning. I told her what I had heard. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Don't confront him. Don't touch anything in the office. Don't tell your son yet. Not until we know what we have. Can you give me 2 hours?" I said yes. She called in late to work. She drove to Barrie from Innisfil, which is 40 minutes on a good day, and longer with the Highway 400 morning traffic. She arrived at my kitchen table at 8:17 with her laptop and a notepad, and a look on her face I had not seen before, focused in a way that made me realize I had never actually seen her fully focused before. Not like this. We went through what I knew. She had me call up everything I had access to, the accounting software, the shared cloud folder where he filed my monthly reports, the backup drive I keep in my office closet that my husband had set up years ago and that I had honestly almost forgotten about. She was looking for discrepancies between what he had told me and what the raw numbers showed. It took about 90 minutes. The reports he'd given me had been adjusted, not dramatically. He was too careful for that. But the supplier contract values in my records were slightly lower than the actual rates I'd negotiated, and the difference, small in any individual month, added up over 2 years to something significant. Nearly $42,000. Additionally, there were consulting fees listed in the expense ledger for a firm I didn't recognize. When she searched the firm's name in the Ontario Business Registry, it came back to a numbered company with no public directors. She looked up at me and said quietly, "He's been billing you for his own fee on top of what you pay him." I had to stand up and go to the window for a moment. She gave me space. She didn't say anything sympathetic, or try to fill the silence. I appreciated that more than I could have told her at the time. When I came back to the table, she had already drafted a note to a forensic accountant she knew through her logistics work, someone based in Newmarket who handles exactly this kind of file. She also had the name of a commercial litigation lawyer in Barrie, which she had apparently found in the time I was standing at the window. "We have time," she said. "He doesn't know you were there this morning. That's actually the best position you can be in." My son arrived at the bakery at 9:30 for his usual Thursday morning. He found us in the kitchen. I watched his face when I told him, watched him go still in exactly the way I recognized from when he was small. When something genuinely shocked him, he didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said, "How long has this been going on?" And here is where I have to be honest about something that I find harder to say. When his wife told him we couldn't be sure yet, but that the documents suggested roughly 2 years, he said he started right after Dad died. And he was right. That was when the first adjusted report appeared in our files. We later confirmed. The year I was grieving. The year I was grieving. The year I was least likely to look closely. My son looked at his wife. Something passed between them that I didn't fully understand, some private conversation conducted entirely without words, and then he looked at me and said, "What do you need from us?" That question, even now. I need to pause here and tell you that I had not made it easy for my son to be part of this business. I had kept the financial decisions close for a long time, partly out of habit, partly out of grief, partly, if I'm being completely honest, because I had been afraid that involving him fully meant acknowledging that the bakery was going to have to go on without me eventually, and I wasn't ready to face that. He had ideas. Good ones, I think now. I had smiled at them and redirected the conversation and called his enthusiasm sweet. I am not proud of this. The forensic accountant came on Friday. She went through 12 months of records in the office while my accountant, who came in for his regular Friday afternoon visit, had no idea she was there. He sat at my desk and went through his usual agenda with me, and I sat across from him and kept my hands flat on the table and talked about the anniversary party and the upcoming HST filing and whether I thought the price of unsalted butter was going to stabilize in the new year. I'm a 63-year-old woman who has survived a flooded bakery, a recession, and the death of my partner of 30 years. I can, when I need to, keep my face extremely still. He left at 4:30. I sat in the parking lot and let myself shake for about 10 minutes. On Saturday morning, the day of the anniversary celebration, the forensic accountant delivered her preliminary report. The total irregular withdrawals, the inflated consulting fees, and the undisclosed payments from the regional chain came to just over $68,000 over 26 months. She had everything documented. Her file was ready to go to a lawyer. My daughter-in-law had already spoken to the commercial litigation lawyer. There was a path forward: civil action for breach of fiduciary duty and a report to the CPA Ontario Ethics Committee, and potentially a matter for the police, depending on how the criminal fraud threshold worked out. She walked me through it at my kitchen table that morning, patiently, the same way she'd walked me through the accounting software 3 days earlier. The celebration was that afternoon. I know this sounds impossible, that I could have gone, that I could have stood in that community hall and thanked people and accepted flowers and eaten anniversary cake while all of this was unresolved and the man who had stolen from me was across the room with a glass of sparkling water in his hand. But I want to tell you that I did go. My son was at my side. My daughter-in-law was across the hall talking to our head baker, and every now and then she caught my eye and gave me a very small nod. The food journalist from the Star came and we talked for 20 minutes about heritage grains and about what my husband had believed about slow fermentation and community. I meant every word I said to her. The bakery is real. The 31 years are real. None of what happened in that office makes the sourdough starter less alive or the morning light less gold. My accountant left the party early. He said he had a prior commitment. The following week, the lawyer sent him a formal letter. His response, through his own lawyer, was to deny everything and suggest the forensic accountant's findings were the result of misinterpreted records. This did not go well for him. The CPA Ontario complaint moved forward. The civil action was filed. I will not go into the full legal process because it took 18 months, and most of it was tedious and exhausting and not at all like what you see on television. It was phone calls and document production requests and waiting. But I will tell you the outcome. He agreed to a settlement that included full repayment of the $68,000, a formal finding by the Professional Conduct Committee, and the permanent revocation of his CPA designation. The regional chain, when their connection to the scheme became clear through discovery, quietly withdrew their standing offer to acquire us. My lawyer described this as a very satisfying coincidence. I hired a new accountant, a woman who had recently left a downtown Toronto firm and relocated to Barrie to be closer to her parents. She came recommended by my daughter-in-law. Of course she did. My son is now a co-owner of Hartwell's. We made it official at the 32nd anniversary. Just family, just a small dinner in the back of the bakery after closing. He brought a bottle of wine from Prince Edward County, which he had apparently been saving for the right occasion. His wife made a speech that made me laugh and cry at the same time, which I gather is the intended effect. There are things I wish I had done differently. I wish I had paid closer attention to the numbers myself, not because the betrayal was my fault. It wasn't. But because I now understand that keeping the financial side of the business to myself wasn't wisdom. It was a kind of loneliness I was performing as competence. I was afraid that asking for help meant admitting I couldn't hold everything alone, and I'd been alone with it for long enough that I'd started to confuse the two things. My husband would have seen it. He was the one who always said that a business is only as strong as the people who understand it together. I thought he meant staff, customers, community. I didn't realize he also meant family. Walt, the delivery driver, still comes on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. Last spring, when the supply chain disruption hit and we couldn't get our usual organic rye from the Collingwood farm, he made 2 extra stops on his route to help me source an alternative. He never mentioned the morning in the laneway. That is exactly his character, and I am grateful for it every time I see his truck turn in off Dunlop. The sourdough starter my husband brought home from university is still in the walk-in a ceramic crock with a piece of masking tape on the lid in his handwriting. I feed it every morning before I do anything else. That, more than anything, is what I kept. I still think about that morning sometimes when I'm unlocking the back door in the dark. The flour dust in the air, the coffee going cold in my hand, Walt's voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it. One small moment, one man who could have said nothing, who had every practical reason to say nothing, and didn't. What happened to my accountant wasn't bad luck. It wasn't a misunderstanding or a grey area or a case of someone making a desperate mistake under pressure. He made a choice, and then he made it again, every month, for 26 months. He sat across from me at my own desk and looked me in the eye and kept making it. That's not a stumble, that's a direction. And directions eventually arrive somewhere. His arrived at a professional conduct hearing and the permanent loss of everything he'd spent his career building. I don't say that with satisfaction. I say it because I think it's important to understand that what we do quietly, when no one is watching, is still something. It still adds up. It still lands. My daughter-in-law didn't have to drive 40 minutes in morning traffic to sit at my kitchen table and help me. She didn't have to be the one who found the numbered company in the Ontario Business Registry, or who already knew a forensic accountant in Newmarket, or who thought to check the backup drive my husband had set up years ago. She did all of that because she is, at her core, a person who moves toward problems rather than away from them. I had not always given her credit for that. I'd mistaken her precision for coldness and her directness for distance. I was wrong. What she has is something rarer, a mind that stays clear when clarity costs something. And my son, I kept him at arm's length from the financial side of this business for years, and I told myself it was protection. What it actually was, I think, is that I was afraid of needing help, afraid of admitting the bakery was bigger than one person, afraid that sharing it meant losing something I'd built with my husband and couldn't bear to let go of. My son had the grace to wait. He didn't push, didn't pressure, didn't walk away. He just kept showing up. Thursday mornings, anniversary planning, a bottle of Prince Edward County wine saved for the right occasion. That kind of steady, quiet persistence in the face of being held back is something I don't take lightly now. The three of them, Walt, my son, my daughter-in-law, all did something that required something of them. Walt spoke up when silence would have been easier. My daughter-in-law acted with precision when emotion might have taken over. My son stayed when distance would have been understandable. None of it was dramatic. None of it made the news. But together, it was enough to save 31 years of work and everything my husband and I built from $1,600 and a sourdough starter. I kept the bakery, I kept the supplier relationships and the heritage grain and the maple syrup from Haliburton. I kept the ceramic crock with my husband's handwriting on the lid. But honestly, what I kept most was this: the understanding that a business, like anything worth having, is only as strong as the people who are willing to stand inside it with you and tell the truth.